The house loomed in the distance, an ancient silhouette against the dimming sky. I had received a letter from Roderick Usher, my childhood friend, pleading for my presence. His words, steeped in desperation, hinted at a darkness that had enveloped him and his sister, Madeline. Compelled by a sense of duty and concern, I made my way towards the house. As I approached, the landscape morphed into a twisted panorama of decay. The trees surrounding the estate were bare, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. A tarn, dark and foreboding, lay at the base of the house, its surface reflecting the structure above, a distorted image that sent a shiver down my spine. I knocked on the door, its creak echoing in the heavy air, and it opened as if inviting me into its depths. Inside, the chill was palpable. The dim light barely illuminated the faded tapestries that clung to the walls, and the portraits of long-dead ushers seemed to follow my every movement with hollow gazes. Roderick appeared in the parlor, a specter of his former self. His skin was ashen, his eyes sunken, filled with a haunting madness that made my heart race. "Thank you for coming," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I fear I am losing my mind." We sat near the flickering fire, the flames casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Roderick spoke of his afflictions, an illness that gnawed at his sanity and a sense of foreboding that enveloped him like a shroud. He described the house as a living entity, one that watched him, that breathed with him. His sister, Madeline, was also suffering, teetering on the brink of death. "She is all I have left," he lamented, his voice cracking. "When she is gone, I will be truly alone." I attempted to reassure him, but the weight of his words settled heavily in the pit of my stomach. There was an aura of dread that surrounded the ushers, an unsettling connection to the house that I could not comprehend. That evening, I met Madeline. She emerged from the shadows, her presence ghostly and ethereal. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if she were caught between worlds. Her eyes, vacant and distant, conveyed a sense of resignation that chilled me to the bone. It was as though she had already crossed the threshold into death. Days turned into a haze of dread as Roderick and I wandered the labyrinthine corridors of the house. Each step felt heavier, as if the very walls were closing in around us. The air thickened with an oppressive weight, and I began to hear whispers, soft murmurs that seemed to emanate from the very stones. The house was alive, and it was watching. Roderick confided in me about the family curse, a dark legacy that bound the Ushers to the land and the house. "It feeds on us," he said, his voice low and trembling. "It will not let us go." I dismissed his fears, yet the atmosphere of the house seeped into my bones, infecting my thoughts with paranoia. Madeline's death came swiftly, an event that shattered Roderick. He insisted on entombing her in the family crypt, a place that reeked of decay and despair. The crypt was a narrow, dark chamber lined with coffins that seemed to whisper of the past. As we laid her to rest, a flicker of something unnatural crossed her face, a faint, twisted smile that sent a jolt of fear through me. The moment we sealed the coffin, a palpable shift occurred in the house. The air grew colder, more suffocating. The whispers intensified, morphing into frantic cries that echoed through the halls. Roderick became increasingly agitated, pacing like a caged animal, convinced that Madeline was still alive, that she was calling out to him. "She's not dead," he insisted, his eyes wild with terror. "She's coming for us." I tried to calm him, but my own fear began to bubble to the surface. The house was changing him, and it was changing me. I could feel its malevolence wrapping around my mind, squeezing tighter with each passing hour. The whispers became unbearable, a cacophony of dread that echoed in my ears. One fateful night, I was jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream. Rushing to Roderick's room, I found him sitting on his bed, eyes wide with horror. "She's here," he gasped, voice trembling. "She's coming." The scratching began then. A faint sound at first, like claws scraping against stone, intensifying as it drew nearer. It was coming from the crypt. "We have to leave," I urged, panic rising in my chest. "Now!" But Roderick shook his head, a look of despair etched on his face. "We can't. The house won't let us." The scratching grew louder, more frantic, drowning out the whispers that filled the air. I grabbed Roderick's arm, pulling him toward the door, but the house seemed to come alive around us, its walls closing in, its shadows reaching out. We bolted down the hall, the sound of scratching pursuing us, a sinister reminder of the horrors we were fleeing. We reached the front door, the mist outside thick and suffocating. I flung it open, and the darkness enveloped us. The tarn loomed before us, a black void reflecting the house in a grotesque distortion. I felt the weight of the house behind me, its presence suffocating, its eyes watching, waiting. We ran into the mist, but I quickly realized Roderick was no longer at my side. I turned to call his name, but the fog swallowed him whole. The scratching ceased, the whispers faded, leaving an eerie silence that pressed against my ears. Panic surged through me, and I sprinted toward the edge of the tarn, desperate to escape the grasp of the house. As the mist began to clear, I turned back, my heart racing. The house stood tall, its windows like hollow eyes, its facade twisted and wrong. I felt a presence, ancient and malevolent, lurking just beyond my vision. The tarn reflected the house, wrong, distorted, alive. I turned and fled, not daring to look back. I ran until my legs ached, until the weight of the house no longer pressed against my chest. But even in my escape, I knew it would haunt me forever. The house was in my mind, my soul. It would always be there. Years later, I returned to the place where the house once stood, but it was gone, swallowed by the tarn. The waters were still, dark, reflecting nothing but the shadow of the sky. I stood at the edge, staring into the depths, feeling that familiar presence once more. I turned and walked away, determined to leave the past behind. But deep down, I knew the truth. The house would never truly leave me. A dark reminder of the horrors I had witnessed, a chilling echo of the Usher legacy that would forever haunt my soul.